Life without the possibility of parole at the age of 16. Is this a constitutional infringement upon a juvenile's right to have an ability to sit before the parole board after decades in prison for receiving a life sentence as a teenager? That's what we're going to discuss in this video. So just recently, a 16-year-old boy was sentenced to life without the possibility of parole. And this is, I'm gonna read some of the quotes on the judge who gave a statement to this individual as he was, or right before he issued him a life without the possibility of parole at 16 years old, excuse me. He said, this is from the judge, "I recognize with your guilty plea, you assume responsibility for your crimes. I also recognize that you were failed by each of your parents. You were failed by your extended family. To a certain extent, you've been failed by a society that can't stop propagating this misguided value of online cultures and the social media rather than making genuine interpersonal connections and relationships. But that failure does not absolve you from what you chose to or who you chose to idolize, worship, and become. 4 lives were stolen." Then the judge said a few more things before he issued out, "And I will sentence you to life without parole at 16 years old." Now, when you hear this, the first thing you may think of is, well, who did he sentence to life without the possibility of parole? And that's a good question, because we tend to focus on who and not what. To me, who and what are both important questions, but a lot of times, let's be honest, as individuals, we focus on who. It only matters who, because if you don't like them, yeah, give them life without parole. But if you like them or you favor them, well, maybe they deserve another chance. It's not about who, it's about what. It needs to be an equal standard across the board, and I'm going to tell you who it was. But first, I want to ask you a question. Do you think that a juvenile should be sentenced to life without parole? Or do you think that all juveniles, no matter what the crime is, should receive a sentence, if the crimes are harsh enough, life with the possibility of parole, considering that the offender is a juvenile? There's a lot of ways that we can go with this conversation, but now I'm going to tell you who the person is who just received life without the possibility of parole, and it was Colt Gray. School, mass, boom, 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 boom. That's right. He took the lives of 4 innocent people at an Appalachian school in Georgia, and in 2024, and he had 55 counts. He was convicted on all 55 counts and received life without the possibility of parole, plus a concurrent sentence of 20 years in prison. Dude ain't never getting out of prison. He is literally going to die in prison, and that's what the judge told him. And in my opinion, the judge got it right. This dude should have, received life without the possibility of parole. But that made me, begin to think. And I remember growing up as a teen, man, I did a lot of stupid stuff. Obviously, y'all all know this is a crime in prison channel, and I spent, a long time in prison. I spent too much time in prison, because anybody who spends time in prison is too much time in prison. But the reality is that we issue out sentences to juveniles with life without the possibility of parole. I'm going back to the 1980s when the song 18 in Life by Skid Row came out. I don't know if y'all remember it, but I remember watching that video, 18 in Life, and I remember thinking, man, this is rough. And as I'm looking back in life, remembering all the people I know who received life sentences for crimes that they committed as teenagers, and how recently some people I know have been released from prison from doing a life sentence because of the new law that changed and said, hey, look, you can't sentence a juvenile to life without the possibility of parole. But under certain circumstances, you can. What you can do under the 8th Amendment is sentence a juvenile to death. But there are also some mitigating circumstances that you can't sentence a teenager to life without the possibility of parole. Now, I think Colt Gray deserves life. If you ask me, he deserves more than life without parole. He probably deserves a death sentence, even though he committed his heinous crimes at the young age of 14 years old. They were premeditated, precisely planned, and executed in an evil and vicious manner to where this person can do no good to society. And I believe that, the Eighth Amendment, we have to respect it. I respect the Constitution of the United States of America. But I think sometimes in the judicial system, we get things wrong. And sometimes we issue out sentences that shouldn't be issued out. Do I think that all people who commit the most heinous charge of first degree murder should get life without the possibility of parole if they commit first degree murder while they're still juveniles? No, I don't think that. I think each case has mitigating circumstances that weigh the scales in favor or against the possibility of life without parole. It just depends, man. And in this situation with Colt Gray, this dude, he went online. He had behind his computer in his house, he had pictures of previous school blasters who did this heinous stuff, and he idolized them and he studied them. He planned on doing this. He was hell bent on committing havoc and chaos. And this isn't about his case, and this isn't about him, about his case directly. It's about the receiving of life without the possibility of parole. And if it's constitutional, and do you agree with it, or does it depend on the crime and the circumstances around the crime? And that's what I tend to lean toward. I don't think everybody should get the same sentence. But in this case, I think the judge and the judicial system 100% got it right, and that Colt Gray should die in prison whenever that time may be. And he's in a Georgia prison. Georgia prisons are a pretty harsh place. So he's going to go through he's going to get tried and tested, and probably a lot of stuff's going to happen to him while he's incarcerated in Georgia State Prison. But it got me to thinking, man, what do y'all think? Do y'all think juveniles should have the possibility of parole? And when I was growing up, I easily could have winded up with a life without parole sentence, because the stuff that I was doing was that careless and reckless, and we did some stupid things. Just thank God that I didn't go down that route and one of my bullets didn't take the life of somebody. And other people I know, their bullets did take the lives of people, and I was slinging them around too. My bullets just didn't happen to land. Thank God that I'm a terrible shot. But I remember, and listen, there's something else about this case that I want to talk about. Colt Gray's father was also convicted. He's waiting to be sentenced. He was convicted. Of course, he's not convicted of first degree unaliving. He's convicted of the lesser count, I think, of second degree, and being, a culprit to the crimes that his son committed, because Colin Gray, Colt's father, actually purchased the semi-automatic rifle that Colt used to commit and the crimes in 2024. And he also had knowledge of his son having mental instability and mental health issues. It was the FBI was on the radar of Colt Gray when he was 13 years old, before he even turned 14, because he made some statements online, and the FBI sent a police out there, and there's footage of it with his dad sitting there and the cop asking questions to then 13-year-old Colt, asking him if he was the person who was connected to this online typing, tapping, threatening, disturbing behavior that he was typing stuff about school boom, boom, booms. And his father sat there idle and didn't involve himself to make a better decision and to inquire about his son. What's going on, son? We need to get you help. Actually, the grandmother tried to tell the father, you need to put him into a rehabilitation program so they can deal with his mental health issues. But his dad did not take heed. And so and usually I want to say, hey, let's step back before we start convicting people who didn't actually plan, plot, or have a part in actually, taking the lives of people like his son did. Can we really start convicting parents? But the more you look at this case, the more you realize that his father was careless and reckless in every way possible. And I'm trying to look at this case in a situation to where, hey, look, maybe his father shouldn't have been convicted of this crime. But the more I look at it, his father was careless. And I think a lot of the deaths of those 4 people who lost their lives and the other people who were injured in this crime, it falls on the shoulders of his father. His father purchased the AR-15 and gave it to him as a Christmas gift, knowing his son had mental instability, and the police had already questioned him about some disturbing behaviors that he wanted to pull something off like this. And his dad didn't do nothing. In fact, he exacerbated the situation by giving his son this rifle. And I'm going to tell y'all a story about how my father was the exact opposite. I remember growing up, obviously y'all know I was a gangster and I was thugging and I was out on the streets doing every kind of crime that you can think of. We were robbing, stealing, shooting, and everything else. And I had a shotgun, and my dad said it was a sawed-off shotgun. And my dad saw the shotgun, and my dad came up to me, and he said, "Say, son, why don't you sell me that shotgun?" And I said, "Huh?" My dad said, "Yeah, I'm going to give you $600. The shotgun wasn't worth $200, brand new. And now it's used." My dad was giving me over 3 times the value of the shotgun to take that shotgun away from me so I wouldn't hurt and harm somebody with it. And I remember my father, he gave me $600. And he was struggling. He didn't have the money to do that, but he was trying to save my life and save somebody else's life. And he bought that shotgun from me to get it out of my hands because he knew I was a gangster and I was out there on the streets ripping and running. Something my father told me that resonates with me to this very day is my dad tried, y'all. He knew what I was doing. And he tried to, he got that shotgun out of my hand. Of course, I got my hands on other pistols and rifles along the way, but he did what he could do, and he did the best he could do. And he sat down and had a talk with me. He said, "Son, I know you out there living the gang life." He said, "But I'm telling you, man," he said, "you're going to do something you're going to regret, and you ain't going to be able to take it back." He said, you out here involved in all these shootings. And he said, one day you're going to wind up taking somebody's life, whether it was intentional or unintentional. He said, you're not going to be able to take that back, and you're going to have to pay the consequences. That's what my father told me. He wasn't pussyfooting and beating around the bush with me. He looked me in my eyes as a man, and he said, when you do that, they are going to put you in prison, because that's the consequences of it. And I want to know that I want you to know that I'm telling you that, so you heard it from me. And I respect my dad from that. I respect my dad for saying that to me. This dude's father, Colt Gray, just like the judge said, he was failed by each of his parents. His mother was a methamphetamine addict, and his grandma tried to get him help. There was a lot of warning signs that could have prevented this, but he also didn't commit a crime. It was just threats. So what do we do when people threaten people? You know what I mean? My father was the exact opposite of his father. That's what fathers and parents should be doing. Do what you can to help your kids. And thank God that my bullets didn't hit somebody and I didn't take somebody's life. And thank God that I got another chance. The Lord spared me and I got out of prison, because, I got sentenced fairly and justly according to the crimes that I had and according to the amount of time that they can give me. On the shooting charge that I had, the maximum sentence was 5 years, and I got 4 years on a drive-by shooting. Yeah, I know that's crazy. Back in the 90s, when drive-by shootings were just starting to take off throughout the nations, in Louisiana, the maximum sentence of a drive-by was 5 years, and I got 4 to 5. So I got almost maxed out on it. And, this dude took somebody's life, and he deserves it, And some of the people I knew as juveniles are still in prison to this day. I have a lot of people I know, friends included, who are in prison for a long time. And some of them may get out, some of them may not. There are things that we do that we need to think about, because there are things that we do that we cannot change. In my opinion, the justice system got it right with giving Colt Gray life without the possibility of parole. I understand each circumstance is different. And when a juvenile goes to prison and sits in prison for decades, he has the ability to change who he was, and he's not the same person and things. But some people do things that are so violent, vicious, and evil that the only consequence could be life without the possibility of parole. And that's being lenient, in my opinion, because you know what the only other option is. And here we are, you know what I mean? So I want you to share any opinions. What do you think about, juveniles receiving life without the possibility of parole? Does it depend on the circumstances, or does it depend on the individual? And did the justice system get it right with this dude? Share in the comments, man. Like, subscribe, and hit that bell notification for the Pen and the Shank, the most unusual and unique crime and prison channel experience on YouTube, as we continue to get this channel going. Man, thanks. Let's get this.